pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father God, we just come to you, Father, just thanking you, Father, for what you do for us, Father. Thanking you, Lord, for what you do on a daily basis, Father. And Father, I just thank you for this city, Father, and for the citizens and for the employees of the city, Father, that take care of things that, that we just really don't even understand what all that is being done for us, Father. And we're just so thankful for that, Lord. And I just ask that you help us to make decisions, Father, that are based on what you would have us to do, Father. And Father, I just pray for the Borger, Lord, and I just ask blessings upon it, Father. And I just pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
And at this time, we'll have questions or comments from any citizen. And I see none, so we will move on to item 5, the city manager's monthly report.
So we'll start with a little bit of some financial reviews. We got 1 month left to go. Your charts still show 2 months, but we're down to about 6 weeks in the budget year, so we're getting a pretty good picture about where we're going to end. In the general fund and both the water sewer funds, you will see that revenues are under expenditures, but if you'll recall, in the general fund, we budgeted a $1,695,296 deficit because we're moving those funds into the capital construction fund for the Johnson Park project and to the capital equipment fund for some other projects. We're actually trending to end the year with a deficit of $767,000. So we had budgeted $1.6 million. We're trending to end at about half of that. So overall, we're trending well in the budgets. That was with a $1.8 million transfer for capital projects. In the water sewer fund, we had budgeted an $843,000 shortfall because we, there again, had moved some excess reserves into the water sewer capital construction fund for our capital projects. Right now, we're trending to end about $500,000 in the negative, so there again, about $350,000 better than what we were budgeted. So both the general fund and the water sewer fund are doing positive because we did budget to use those funds for capital expenditures. Keep in mind that we are still above our 28% reserve requirement and all of that, so we're still financially quite strong in both those funds. Sales tax right now, we're still above the budget and above our 5-year average. Right now, with a month to go, one more payment, we're trending about $15,000 over what our amended budget will be, and that's about $140,000 over what the original budget was. So sales tax is still doing positive. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to our tax rate presentation, because as I've mentioned several times, we do have that half cent for property tax reduction, so our sales tax revenue also impacts our effective tax rate. HOT is also, the hotel occupancy tax is still above budget and the 5-year average, so we're trending well there. I did kind of want to mention just a little bit about our EMS revenue. So as of today, we've received $980,656,000 in EMS revenue. So we're trending towards our budgeted amount of $1.129 million in revenue. So that's about 50 short of what we had originally budgeted, which is about 4% less. We might do a little better than that depending on how it ends up. But I think, hitting our revenue within 4% on our first year of not knowing what that revenue is, I think is pretty good. So what that means is based on what our expenses are, we are projecting a $263,562,000 loss. If you remember, that was compared to the $670,000 supplement stipend that AMR had requested. So as the conclusion of our first full year operating, it looks like we're able to operate it at about a 60% savings over what AMR had requested. So that
better service.
Financially, it definitely made sense, and then we get the other benefits of that as well, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we get into the fire department. There's been some progress there too. So as we talk about projects, 10th Street, they're still working on the last little bit of the sewer, which is the utilities on the north side. We hope to hopefully have that finished up within the next 2 weeks and get moved back on to actual street work. So I know that has been a little bit frustrating with the appearance of lack of progress. We did discover a manhole that we had not planned on discovering, which delayed just a little bit getting that manhole in, but they have been working, and You'll notice that the Texas Gas is now back out there tearing up one of our new parking areas to tie in their new gas line that they're running down Andrus and down all in that area. So we were unaware that that was on their plans, and they gave us no notice, but it's luckily not impacting traffic, and they will be responsible for patching and repairing the parking area over there. So, you know, the gas line they replaced earlier in our project was their main gas line there, which is why the new gas line they're now replacing farther down in the neighborhood has to tie into the gas line there that they replaced.
Are they still real behind on patching where they repair? I know that at one point it was.
We don't do that for them anymore, so we make them get a third-party contractor. They have finally caught up with all of their payments to us, so they don't owe the city anymore, but we have not been patching for them.
Well, I knew that it was taking them a long time.
Yeah, and that was part of the problem with getting the street department to do other stuff, because when you're doing all the water cuts and all the gas cuts, you know,
Yeah,
and then they weren't paying, so,
yeah, absolutely.
but they do not owe us any money as of right now. So, and actually Terry just got a lot of that squared away on some other little things that they owed us, and they have paid all their invoices now for the rate case expenses that we ate 2 years ago when we were making sure that their rate case was appropriate. They've started in full force at the Johnson Park Youth Center. If you've noticed that from some of the pictures, they've got most of the deck already out. They've been cutting around the pool as that project moves forward. So you can really kind of tell how old that thing is now that they're kind of getting it all broken up and torn up. Definitely was needed. Got what concrete we could pour at the pass-through park this last week. You remember the front half of that? Is where that pergola is going, and so we've got to pour footings before we can pour the surface concrete for that. And that pergola was the long lead item, which we're still hoping to get delivered sometime in October. So they've got most of everything done they can do until we get that pergola. So you might still see some weeks and stuff where it doesn't look like much is there, but all the electrical rough in, all the meter box, all of that's there, the sprinkler system and all of that stuff is there. They will be putting the masonry cap on shortly, but like I said, we don't want to pour concrete and then jackhammer it up to pour the footings for the pergola that's coming. The Rock Creek Sewer Project is also progressing, so we've sent some pictures out on that. We do have the first 2 pillars poured on either side of the creek.
You don't find any cars?
Not yet, but they think that's under 3rd Street.
Okay.
So they have tried to start the footing for the center pillar, but some of the rain has been slowing making the creek bed a little wet for that, but that is still progressing. As we go through our departments, dispatch currently has 2 openings, so they're currently hiring there. They've also worked on expanding the police department's FTO softwares into a more defined FTO program for dispatchers, so we're kind of excited about that. Login training, get those people trained up. At the same time, they've also created all their ProQA recertifications, which is the protocol software for med, fire, and police. So always like seeing when we can expand or utilize software that we have in one department being utilized in another department to make that worthwhile. Also, Ms. Zollers has completed her licensing exam, so she's now met her time requirements and her training and is now licensed by the state as a telecommunicator. And Dispatcher Holsey's completed his class, so he's just waiting for his time to take the licensing exam. The fire marshals also had a pretty busy month. We did get the bicycle helmets for all ISDs distributed, so that was part of Project Shield. So remember a couple of years ago, we moved from doing the kind of defined fire marshal fundraiser through the third party, which you could only buy the stuff that was out of their calendar, to just operating it ourselves, taking those donations into our emergency management fund and dedicating those, so they were able to buy a lot. I don't remember how many it was.
Still like 500.
Because what they gave them to
It's all pre-K.
the pre-K kids at all the county, and the dispatchers really helped them. They put the Project Shield stickers on every single helmet. So between carrying the boxes over there and then putting the little stickers on there so that everybody knew what provided them, but we got every kid a bicycle helmet, so that was definitely well worth it. On that safety side, our safety trailer, Edith, the exit drills in the house, is currently out of service. It's starting to have some maintenance issues, so I'm not for sure. We're in the process of determining whether or not it's cost effective to try to repair that, or if we need to look into other alternatives to get it replaced. If you remember, Phillips 66 helped donate that quite a while ago now, so we've had it. It's just, and some of that stuff, the smoke machines and all that stuff are pretty high maintenance, but we definitely want to have something like that available for our community, so we'll look at what we can do with that in the coming. Jason and Jason, the Jasons, have also been busy getting prepped for the grant application. So, since this was an FMAG fire, the wildfires, we are going to be eligible for $1.9 million in hazard mitigation grants. I believe we talked about that a little bit earlier. So they're looking at 2 grant applications. One, because one of the areas that you can put in for is stormwater. So we're going to try to apply for our 3rd Street stormwater project that came in so high, so maybe we can get some assistance with that. These are 75% federal share, 25% city share. So we'll put that in. And then they are also working on the 2nd grant, which TDM seems to be very favorable of and meets FEMA's guidelines, as we're looking at putting in some fire and smoke detection cameras. So you have some camera systems now that you can put on the periphery, and they using IR and all this fancy new proprietary software, they can actually alert you to a possible wildfire start. And so we're likely going to apply for that project, and if that gets funded, then we'll have some ideas. If you can get it you can see it and get it identified early and get some resources out there, maybe that'll help. That's pretty, a little more common in some of the western states. Of course, a lot of that dates back to, I was always, as a little kid, I was enthralled by the fire watch tower out in the woods of Missouri, and was always a little upset that I never could climb to the top because it was off limits. But so now we're looking at maybe doing some of that with a camera, that software. You can set it up to where when it detects, it notifies a set chamber. So we're looking at that. That should be pretty good. We did get a dispatch weather station, or a weather station added to dispatch center, so a pretty nice one, so that they can have wind speeds and some things like that at dispatch without relying on some of the slight delay in the WeatherNet reporting sites, kind of just to give an early indication of in a hazmat situation or something like that, if they need an immediate direction and wind before you get a more refined one. We talked about this a little bit. We're still kind of working on the radar project. It gets so close, and then something happens. One of the replacement parts was defective. And so they've had to be working with that, had to send it back for the company to find it was defective, but we've got that replacement part in here. We have been working with Pantex and their IT department, just working on through some of the connectivity issues, but IT's been supporting that quite well. IT's a little bit challenged on that. Well, remember, we're working with a nuclear facility, so you can imagine some of their requirements, but we're going pretty well with that. We've also been looking at some VOG software demos and stuff. VOG is kind of would replace our D4H notification software, but it also has the possibility to streamline some of our reimbursement requests when we do have reimbursement, tracking time and cost, and automating some of that process so we don't have to do so much work. It could be a benefit to our TIFMAS responses as well, but we're still seeing if that might be the case. And they're getting ready for the FCC. Our radio license renewals are coming up. In addition to working with the radar IT, they've been running some coaxial cable, so that's kind of a new skill for them, working through that, so that can save us some money if they can run some of that's mainly for radios and things like that, so that's definitely beneficial. They've also been working on a GIS application, your mapping application to track storm shelters in the county, so they've been busy with that. In HR, of course, we are hiring. We do have openings right now in dispatch, solid waste, and the fire department. And we've been implementing our new onboarding and perform software. So we have moved our performance evaluations into a software to help us kind of better keep track of that. It also gives us the ability to have a constant feedback. Employees and supervisors will do quarterly check-ins so that we can make sure that issues are addressed earlier and that we're continuing to develop and tie everything to our Boomtown Pride core values. If you recall, Pride is professional, responsive, innovative, diverse, and empowered. So we're kind of refining that process, and Michelle's been a good help with that. In finance, believe it or not, September 9th, the auditor will be on site for our pre-audit field work for the 2024 audit. So finance has been busy trying to reconcile a bunch of stuff and get ready for that. So we're kind of, this is our normal time, and if everything goes well on September 9th, it'll make the December visit and audit be a little smoother and on time. So that's been pretty good. We did finish our intern in finance, and so she was a great help working through inventory and organizing and catching up some things. So the other two interns are waning down, but our finance intern had, she thought apparently a pre-starting school trip to London was more exciting than staying in the finance department. So I'm a little disappointed that Terry couldn't convince her to do financial work instead of going to London.
Yeah, really.
And then we did have a good month reconciling our credit cards last week, and all the departments got all their credit card receipts in to where we actually got to close the month on the first of the month. So hopefully we can kind of keep up with that positive trend. In planning and development, the code enforcement team, they focused in the area around Paul Belton just before school started, trying to get some of the grass and overgrown weeds mowed down, and we did get one structure demoed in that area. Of course, weeds is still a big problem. A little bit of rain here really makes them grow good, and they're working on that. You know, they want to remind everybody again that, remember, alleys and easements are responsible of the property owner if at all possible. Our lawn care kits are practically being used daily. Don't forget, we do have those available. If you don't have a means of mowing, you can come borrow a means of mowing. Public Works actually did help catch up on some right-of-way and some other mowing, and we appreciate Public Works' help with that. The Board of Adjustment approved a carport easement, or a carport variance for a residence. We're getting ready to approve an administrative modification to the Yucca Estates plat, Excel 1, and some dedicated easements for their ground transformers. If you may or may not know, we planned on underground electrical service for the new development, and so Excel wants some easements. So since we're not changing any of the lot layouts, we can do that administratively, but we're working through that. We have received service confirmation on our zoning enforcement lawsuit on Bowman Street. So he has been served, and he has until Labor Day to file a response in the court. So we'll see how that goes. In the police department with animal control, so Jared Harper completed his animal cruelty investigator course and is now certified, and Candace Caldwell, our new animal control officer, has completed her basic animal control certification. So they're all back to being certified and full strength. Scooters held a day at where their profit was donated to the Borger Animal Shelter. They used that money to buy a stock tank, which is now kind of a swimming pool for the dogs. So if you've seen some of the pictures on Facebook, apparently they quite enjoy their little cool-off romp in the
Go ahead.
Well, the name that we used to call a swimming pool, using a stock tank as a swimming pool when I was growing up, may or may not be appropriate to be reset.
Do they combine that with flea dip?
And then we did have 35 dogs attended and this is the last time this year I'm going to have to say it, but 35 dogs did attend at the pool potty. So they had a pretty successful event with that. At the police department, they participated in the Iron Horse motorcycle rodeo over in Amarillo last month, and Dustin Anderson, our motor officer, he got first in the team event and first in the novice category, so we congratulate him on earning some hardware and representing the city well. Captain Sims and Lieutenant Morris attended law enforcement leadership training. Of course, our 2 recruits have hit the street and are now in the FTO program, and they've already had a lot of unusual things thrown at them in their first week, so we'll see how they get ready. It's not every day you work a radioactive car crash and arrest a murder suspect from another jurisdiction and then have another aggravated assault murder in our community. So while we wish it had been better, they are getting trial by fire. Definitely been a week. They also helped with the back-to-school fair for the short amount of time that the back-to-school fair tried to happen before we got some rain, but we'll definitely take the rain. We also, both the fire and the police department were at the Boots versus Badges blood drive. For somehow, probably because the cops threatened with arrest, the police department, the Badges did win, I believe. But it wasn't by much, so I think, that goes to show.
A win's a win.
And then we did manage to get the new SRO hired and in, so we did start the school season with all 6 SROs in place. So I'm sure that it's going quite well. In the fire department, Assistant Chief Hall has completed his Fire Instructor 3 certification, so that's a big step for him as we continue to use internal training to, both promote the department and the community. The fire department also attended fentanyl training at the police department hosted by the DEA. So that's some of that benefit of being a part of their task force and having access to those resources. So you are seeing some of that starting to pay back. Again, like we mentioned, they were at the blood drive and the school fair as well. We've been busy with TIFMAS in the last month, so we did send people to Houston following hurricane cleanup. Mike and several people were in California for a 2-week stint, and then we have a TIFMAS truck in Lubbock right now on fire severity standby. That southeastern South Plains, kind of Wichita Falls area is in some pretty high fire danger right now. So we'll see how that goes. Also want to commend Amber Brack in EMS. She has passed her paramedic certification exam. So we talked about EMS earlier. We do have another paramedic now certified, and we still have some in the fire department working through that class. So we're increasing those training and service levels that we can provide to our community. We're also working, probably at the next council meeting, I'll have a interlocal agreement to approve us joining the Texas EMS Task Force. That's kind of the EMS part of TIFMAS. So that would give us an ability to go help on hurricane responses. And you did notice during the wildfires, we had a lot of ambulances here. They were part of that Texas task force. So it's handled through a different state agency, so it's a little bit of a different process. But once we get the 4th ambulance later this year that's slated to be delivered, we'll be able to allow our EMS personnel some time to go get some additional funding and make a little additional money to offset our costs. So that will be on the next council agenda. Archie was also a part of the Great Plains Fire Summit that happened this last month. Jason Whistler had gone and said it was a really good event, but Archie was able, he gave a presentation on our prescribed burn on the 4-6, and its benefits to our community, which was, I think everybody saw that, but they've had a lot of good exposure from that. Then he was a part of 2 panels on day 2. One was just talking about the Panhandle wildfires and responses and that, and then he also gave a presentation on escaped burn. So like when a prescribed fire escapes your containment and how to deal with that. I know that in the commission that they held that some of the holdback on supporting prescribed fire more was that what happens when you do lose containment and they expand, but there are ways to address that. And in utilities, of course, utilities has been busy. As it heats up is when the ground shifts the most, and so we get a lot of water leaks when that happens. So they've been keeping up with that. We did put out some public education on that on Facebook, and just remember that still about we've had 250 service line leaks this year compared to 35 water main leaks. So most of them are still, vast majority, the small service lines going from the main to the meter at the house. So when it is a small leak that is not an imminent danger of reducing pressure on the system, we still have to call in a dig test, and we still have to wait the prescribed time before we can dig. So if you call in a water leak, even if we know about it, and even if we had time to fix it that day, we cannot fix it that day. You've got to call in and give the utilities time to mark it. And so then sometimes they go through it. So on average, we are repairing and replacing more than one service line a working day. So they are working, they are getting to it. It's just we've had, as it gets really hot, the ground shifts, you rub some of that, and it kind of gets more in a shorter period of time. But they are working through it. The sewer crew's been helping through some of that, but we're not ignoring anybody. They are working through the list. I know that water is a precious resource. We keep track of the water that is lost. We lose less than 2%. And so when we talk about water loss, we know how much we produce and get from our water sources, and we know how much we bill. And so the water loss is the difference between what you produce and what you bill. And then of that total amount, another 2% is equated to leaks on the customer side. And so overall, we're still pretty efficient with that. Those are pretty good numbers overall on that leak, and they are getting to it.
On the water lines that they're replacing, are they going back with flex, or are they going back with rigid pipe, or what?
They are going back with a flexible, but they're sleeving them. So because anybody that's probably ever tried to use a shovel in and around Borger knows that, you know, the dirt is not exactly rock-free. And that's generally what wears through the water lines is over years, they just rub against that rock. So by sleeving them, we make sure that the pipe is more protected. You know, the last 10 years, we've replaced probably close to 50% of the service lines, but, you know, keep in mind, we do about 200 a year, and there are 4,800 active services, so just, it's not I would reiterate, this is not it's not necessarily a money issue. You know, but at the same time, we don't want to go replace things that aren't leaking and just go tear up whole neighborhoods and have to tear up whole streets, because then the money would become an issue. And none of this is impacting water quality or the overall condition of the water system. So I would remind everybody that we do have a superior rated water system from the TCEQ. So overall, we're still in really good shape, even though you might see some leaks. But remember, there are 4,800 service lines that have an opportunity to leak. So if you're going around town and you see 10 leaks out of 4,800 is pretty good. So you've got to kind of look at it in the context of things. So otherwise, that's what I have for the last month. Any questions or?
So they get fixed those lines get fixed as they leak. I mean, they're like, you know, with our roads, you know, we had that study. There's nothing that, it wouldn't, like you said, you would have to just tear them. Okay.
Right, you pretty much
There's
have to
not like a
expose
study
those
or
to, there are things that you can do, but they all require inspection of some sort, or even if you run a camera, you got to depressure the system. If you depressure the system, you have to disinfect the system. And when was has anybody in here remember the last time we had a boil water notice?
No. I can't remember. So, yeah.
In reality, it's been 4 years since that backhoe hit
Yeah.
over by the hotel.
Yeah.
But it was fixed within 3 hours and
Yeah.
was lifted. So that other than that, I mean, you know, the system integrity is good.
Yeah.
Way better than most. If you look on the news almost every week, especially this time of year, you see some city somewhere issuing a boil water notice because they've lost pressure in their system. You know,
Right.
you don't have that here. And luckily so, and I think, but because of that, when people aren't used to it, they,
Yeah. Well, they do think about the waters being
right.
lost. I mean, they
Yeah,
wasted or whatever.
And we do care about that, but even when we have mainline repairs, I mean, it's normally, it's a reduction in pressure, but not enough reduction that it necessitates a boil water notice. Or we've been able to isolate it to where it doesn't extend any farther, so. What else?
Thank you. Thank you, Garrett. And so we'll move on now to the consent agenda, items 6 through 9. If anyone has anything, and if not, we'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to accept consent agenda items 6 through 9 as written.
Second.
And all in favor? And they pass. And item 10, receive a presentation, conduct a public hearing, and then consider and take appropriate action to introduce on first reading ordinance O-005-24, adopting a combined tax rate of .656645 per $100 valuation for fiscal year 2025. Mr. Spradling.
So, as the council knows, we've been kind of working through this for a couple of years. Well, we do it every year, but.
Feels like it's been.
Yeah, you know, this time of the year is always, you know, kind of a little bit hectic for me. But I always kind of want to start out with There we go. So I do like to start off, our budget and tax rate presentations with reminding everybody that we do have a ton of financial transparency information on our website. So that's borgertx.gov. The budget, and we'll talk more about that next week, but the proposed budget is up there in the online format. We do kind of make the budget in a digital manner. It's actually better viewed and explored online than it is in the paper. And we'll talk about that in 2 weeks at that meeting. But all of our tax rate history and notices are on there. So if you have not been to the Borger's website and visited that transparency page, definitely should feel free to do that. So this year I've kind of, I do kind of want to look at our appraised values. So these are our certified freeze adjusted appraised values. So you'll see the history and the increase over the last several years. Of course, this year you will see a pretty good drop. The reason for that drop is the council earlier this year passed a 20% homestead tax exemption. So that homestead tax exemption removed $60 million from the tax rolls. So if you add $60 million on top of 476, you're actually at 530, which would have been $30 million more than last year's freeze adjusted. So evaluations are still going up, but our homestead exemption brought that down for some of the homestead, for those that have a filed homestead on their house. So at the same time, if you look at what our rate has done in that same period, our rate has decreased significantly. And so you will see that we've gone from 0.863 in 2018 to this year's proposed 0.65. You see 6.5 there twice because that's also the no new revenue rate. So that extra column is just showing you what the no new revenue rate is. And we'll talk about that some more on the next slide, but you'll see we're at that. So this year's rate is a slight increase from last year's rate, but because we did a 20% homestead exemption, we are not making any additional revenue in total off of that. And we'll see how that impacts people in just a second.
Garrett, can I ask, on the homestead, you say they have to, you file for that. I mean, it's not just automatically that you live in your, I mean, you can only do that if you live in your home, though.
Right. It has to be your
I mean,
primary residence, and you
it's
can only have one homestead in the state of Texas, and you
Which is-
file that through the appraisal district.
Which is why we did that, is to help the citizens.
Right.
of Borger.
Because last year when we were looking at this, if you look at that tax rate, we had lowered the tax rate, but the income on the taxes on the average home had actually continued to go up, because the residential appraisals were increasing faster than the commercial appraisals, so the residential homes were bearing a bigger portion of the tax burden than commercial properties. So by doing a homestead tax exemption, that's how you shift that a little bit. So now the rate goes up, so commercial properties will be paying a little bit more, which includes rental houses and things like that, but those that live here, own their home, and are part of the community pay a little less. So we were the only entity that did not have some percentage of homestead tax exemption. Now, I will say that we had, compared to what not everybody else does the senior and disabled freeze. And so we had for years done the senior and disabled freeze, which is why the city had not done a homestead tax exemption in the past, because they had already given up more than what some other agencies were doing by doing the senior and disabled freeze. But now we're caught back up. So pretty much right now, between the senior tax freeze, the disabled tax freeze, and the 20% homestead exemption, the city has adopted the maximum of all discounts and freezes that state law allows us to do. So there is nothing more left for us to do. Well, I take that back.
Yeah.
The one thing that we can do is last year they passed to where we could make child daycare facilities exempt from property tax. We haven't done that because right now we do not have a for-profit daycare center in the city. So the Stepping Buttercup and all, they're nonprofit. So, and the churches, so we don't have, nobody operates one right now that's paying taxes anyway. So there's no benefit in us doing that. It wouldn't change anything. So, but other than that, we provide the most rebates, most highest homestead exemption. 20% is the maximum homestead exemption you can give. So we're, I think, being quite generous in our tax policies. So when we look at where we're at this year, so our current tax rate is 0.6475. That breaks down to the no new revenue rate is wrong on that slide. It's transposed. It's 65645. But it is correct at the proposed rate. So the voter approval rate was 0.893. So we could go from 6.4 to 0.89 without needing an election, because we've been banking some of that. So our proposed tax rate is the no new revenue rate, which is 0.656645. That breaks down to a maintenance and operation rate of 0.500359. So that's the amount that's coming into the general fund to support general operations. And the INS rate, which is the debt rate to support debt payments, is 0.156286. So the overall increase is 0.009145. If you recall earlier, when we discussed the homestead tax exemption, we were projecting that it could raise the rate as much as 0.71. So we actually didn't even raise it 1/10 of a cent. So it's a very minimal increase. And then, of course, it is at the no new revenue rate. So what people probably care about the most is, what does this actually mean on their impact? So there are two charts on this slide. The first chart is if you are not a homestead, and the second chart is if you are a homestead. So if you are not a homestead, our tax rate is going up 1.41%. The average appraised value went up 8%. So last year, the average appraised value of a home in Borger was $78,500. This year, it's $85,077. So the tax levy on an average appraised house is going up 10%. So if you do not have a homestead, your taxes last year were $508.29. Your taxes this year will be $558,065. That's if you have the average value home. So the tax levy, the total amount that we will collect off of that rate, last year was $3,168,184. This year is $3,151,960. So you see that that's a decrease of 0.5. We are adopting the no new revenue rate, which you would think means we're making the same amount of money. But if you remember, we talked earlier about sales tax, and there is a 0.5% of that sales tax that goes for property tax reduction. So when they factor in that rate, they look at how much our sales tax has increased, and that drives our property tax rate down. So our sales tax was up about $150,000. It drove the property tax down by about $88,000. So commercially owned properties, that's kind of the impact. Now, if you have a homestead, there again, the tax rate's going up 1.41%. The average value is $78,500, but now if you take off that 20%, it drives the average value down to $70,898, or a 20% decrease, because we did a 20% homestead exemption. That takes the average tax levy to $508.29. From $508.29 to $465.55, which is about an 8% decrease in your total tax bill. And there again, the levy is the same. And then this year there was a little over $3 million in new property added to the roll. So either new renovations, accessory building additions, some sort of new property. So when you look at our property tax revenue over the last 8 years, you can see that we've slowly been decreasing the amount that we've been bringing in for property tax. So that, I think, is one of the #1 biggest misconceptions, is that we've raised your taxes.
Yeah.
The city of Borger has not raised your taxes and is not making more money on property tax. I'm not saying your taxes haven't gone up, but it's not coming to us. And so much so, in fact, I wanted to add this slide this year. This is what we call foregone revenue. So this is the amount of additional money we could have made each year if we had adopted the rate right below the voter approval rate. So if the council had adopted the maximum amount they could have, in 2021, we could have made $467,000 more in property tax revenue. In 2022, that would have been $938,000 more. In 2023, that would have been $1.1 million more. And in 2024, this year, if we had adopted the no new revenue rate, it would have been 784. Now, of course, that's lower than 2023 because in 2023, we didn't have the homestead tax exemption. This year, we had the homestead tax exemption. So the council could have adopted a rate that would have generated $784,000 more revenue than what we're proposing and what the council will take action on today. So I think that's pretty good. I will say that sometimes we talk about, as we move that rate down, remember there are benefits to being able to stack it. So to me, and what this council has talked about, in the past, that's our emergency fund. When you worry about what happens if something happens, we can generate another $800,000 a year if something terribly wrong happens. But the city is not going broke. We are not spending money we don't have. We're actually being efficient and giving a significant amount back to the taxpayers. Actually, this year, we're letting them keep $784,000 that we could have asked for. Questions on the tax rate?
No. If not, then I guess we will open a public hearing. If anyone has anything they'd like to speak or say or ask. And
Should be a lot of happy people when we're not,
I see none, so we will close the public hearing. And at this time, I'll entertain a motion.
I move to introduce on first reading ordinance O-005-24, adopting a combined tax rate of 0.656645 per $100 valuation for fiscal year 2025.
Second.
And we'll vote with a show of hands. All in favor? And it passes. And moving on to item 11, receive the fiscal year 2025 proposed operating budget. Schedule a public hearing for September 3rd, 2024 at 6:30 PM, and then consider and take appropriate action to introduce on first reading ordinance O-006-24, adopting the fiscal year 2025 operating budget. Mr. Spradlin.
Going to keep it a little short on this item this time. We will have our presentation, PowerPoint, and all the financials at our next meeting. I don't like to do the tax rate and the budget at the same meeting. That just gets too long. But I'll entertain any questions you might have on the budget right now, but we'll do the public hearing and have a presentation, go deeper into it. I will remind everybody it is posted on the website, www.borgertx.gov/transparency, or click on the little link that says transparency. It's all on there, and we'll go over some of that again next week too. And of course, the council has you've seen the financials several times, but now you've got the fancy printed.
Yeah. Yes, we do. So if there's nothing, then I'll entertain a motion.
I move to receive the fiscal year 2025 proposed operating budget, schedule a public hearing for September the 3rd, 2024 at 6:30 PM, and introduce ordinance O-006-24, adopting the fiscal year 2025 operating budget.
I second.
All in favor? And it passes. And moving on, so we'll have that presentation next meeting. Moving on to item 12, consider and take appropriate action to introduce on first reading ordinance O-007-24, amending the City of Borger's fee schedule for the fiscal 2025 budget year. Mr. Spradling.
And we'll list these again in the presentation in 2 weeks, but so this fee schedule supports some of our revenue estimates in the budget. Most of the fee changes are pretty minor. Again, it's 50 cents more per month for solid waste and the tipping fees at the transfer station. Our rates go up annually. What Pampa charges us to dispose of trash goes up annually, so we raise those 50 cents annually to help compensate for that. And then the other big change is the sewer base rates increasing by $2.25 a month. That's as was suggested in the 2022 rate study. We were over collecting water and under collecting sewer. So if you remember, we raised it last year, but last year we also had a decrease in the water consumption rate. So this year, there's no, water rates are staying the same. The only rate that's going up on your utility bill is the 50 cents for solid waste and the $2.25 flat rate on the sewer. So the consumption rate isn't changing. So what that breaks down to is if you have a three-quarter inch meter and you use less than 1,000 gallons a month, your bill's going from $70.75 a month to $73.50. And if you spend 3,000 gallons a month, your bill's going from $89.80 to $92.10. So pretty minor. If you look at what the utility bills have increased over the last 5 years, we have increased the rates below the inflationary rate. So we have not even been keeping up with inflation. So as we try to be efficient, we have been pretty good at saving you some on your tax bills and limiting our fee increases. In the item, there is a page listing all the other fees that are going up. The other really kind of big change is we're increasing the dome rental fees by 10% to help offset the cost of adding another position out there. Our rates are still
Yeah. Very good.
cheap compared to other areas.
Yeah,
We are not changing the nonprofit rate, but all the other rates are going up a little bit, so that's pretty minor overall. So then there's some other little minor changes, and we've got all those fees that we, especially fire department fees and police fees, if we charge them to insurance companies on certain responses, some of those are going up to account for nozzle increases, hose cost increases, radio cost increases, and we are changing the reimbursement rates for all the salaries because there is a cost of living adjustment included in the budget. But that's pretty much for the fees, and we'll discuss a little bit more in summary again next week, but I'll entertain any questions you might have on the fee schedule.
I don't think so. If not, then I'll entertain a motion.
I move to introduce on first reading ordinance 0-007-24, amending the City of Borger Code of Ordinances, Chapter 1, General Provisions, Article 1.07, Fee Schedule.
Second.
All in favor? And it passes. And moving on to item 13, consider and take appropriate action to award the bid on a 22 cubic yard automated side loader solid waste collection truck to Bond Equipment Company, Inc. for $404,816 utilizing buy board cooperative purchasing agreement 723-23. Hi, Mr. Smalls.
Obviously, I'm not Jason, so. But getting Mayor and Council,
Yes.
a little bit of background on this side loader. It's an automated truck we use to pick up and remove solid waste from curbside routes throughout the city. These routes use the tan polycarts and the green polycarts to pick up. It's, I guess, it's using the automated arm, which we call the one-arm bandit, which reaches out and picks up the polycart. Most of your neighborhoods in Buena Vista, Country Club, the elderly who request a polycart use the services of the automated truck. Roughly, we got about 675 tan and green polycarts throughout the city. And one good thing about this, they do a 4-day route, I believe, and they pick up these twice a week. With the new development housing coming to Borger, they will be all polycarts. So this gets us kind of ahead of the ball game.
Oh, that's
so.
good.
But currently, we have a 2009 and a 2016 automated side loader. Both trucks have been experiencing a lot of maintenance issues. Plus, like I say, the 2009 truck probably should have been replaced quite a while ago, but we still have it. But they have been impacting our routes, and especially the 2009 truck had a lot of maintenance issue with it. So, and as part of the replacement doing for the fiscal year 2025, part of the 5-year community investment plan, and that's why we're bringing this forward to replace that 2009 truck. But the 2016 truck would then be removed as a backup truck. Yeah. Bob asked earlier a question about the trucks. You was asking Gary to
I was confused.
okay.
He was
Yeah.
confused about
'Cause we
solid
got two
waste.
different types of
Solid
trucks.
waste
We got
confused
side
him.
Different
loaders,
types of waste.
then we got the polycar truck. Okay.
He was asking about your screw, but it wasn't for that type of waste.
How long will it take to get this in? This
The
truck?
lead time, Pete, they told us they have the chassis on the ground.
That's why we're asking for this now, because right now they have a chassis available.
Yeah.
Available.
And it is in the budget, but we haven't officially approved the budget. But, you know, y'all have seen it, you know it's coming, but we'd really like to latch on to this while we have a chassis that's available.
They have it on the ground. They have the body on it, have it done and ready in 90 days.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So,
I will say, we have never bought one of these trucks new, which is part of the reason we're having
the maintenance issues,
Maintenance
yes.
issues.
maintenance issues. The 2009 was bought used when we moved to polycarts, which was a great move, but if you recall before that, they were curbside. It took 3 people to operate the rear load truck to go around and throw all the bags of trash into the back of it, hand walking those routes. So to save money when we moved to the automated pickup, we bought the used truck.
Yeah.
I think the goal was to see how it would work, and then we'd eventually buy a new one. We never did buy a new one. We bought another used one that was even worse than the first used one, that red one that had even worse problems. And so I think we all agree that polycarts have been a good switch to that, and it's time to invest in.
Yeah.
As per Mr. Ration, most communities are going is in the polycart route
Yeah.
Yeah.
instead of the big ugly 3-yard dumpsters.
Yeah, exactly. Them things are ugly.
Well, and I know we've mentioned it, and I'm not saying we're necessarily proposing getting rid of all your dumpsters, but a polycart is $60, serves one person, and lasts for about 15 years. A dumpster is $600, serves 4 people, and lasts for 5 years.
Sometimes it serves 10 or 20, depending on if somebody drives by and uses your dumpster.
That's a whole nother subject.
Personally, that's why I like my polycart, because it's mine, and I control what goes in it, and I can
kinda
keep
like
it
that
clean, and I don't have to worry about any of, well,
So you have to be elderly to request a polycart?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
You don't qualify.
I don't know. Yeah.
yes, you do.
Okay.
But the financial impact, we've put in $400,000 in the budget for this for the fiscal year 2025. But the bid we received was just slightly over the budget at just $4,000, $816. It's just like
Yeah.
$4,800 over budget, but anyway. And that small difference will be made up during the fiscal year. The staff will recommend approval ahead of the budget adoption to prevent delays, like we just mentioned, Pete asked about the time, to go ahead and get this truck started and get it delivered in the 90-day period.
Okay.
Any more questions?
No, you did a great job. Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you, Winston. Thank you.
And I've been lined out on what the solid waste is.
Oh, okay.
I got my stuff to go now.
You got your solid waste? Just kidding. If there's nothing else, then I'll entertain a motion.
I move to award the bid of a 22 cubic yard automatic side loader solid waste collection truck to Bond Equipment Company Incorporated for $404,816, utilizing buy board cooperative purchase agreement 723-23.
Second.
And all in favor? And it passes. And it's nice to see, some of the directors out here, presenting. I like that. So thank you, Winston. And next, we'll move on to item 14, consider and take appropriate action on Resolution R-019-24, authorizing participation in the tax pool prime investment pool and designating authorized representatives to act on behalf of the city. Ms. Langwell.
Hi, I don't have a big presentation. Tax pool we use regularly for all of our investments, and the interest rates are changing all over the place, so we thought it was a good time to look at the tax pool prime. Garrett has put a memo in there that shows that the fee goes from 0.0473% a year to 0.0638% a year, but they usually offer a significant higher interest rate. The only change is that you have to wait longer to withdraw it. So right now, if something's in tax pool, we can get it the very next day. Now it's a 2-day window, maybe 3. We're not at that big of a cash crunch that would be an issue. So if we can get a little more interest out of it, then we think we should try to do that. It's still through tax pool, it's just a separate kind of account, so we have to have a resolution to say that we can do that.
Okay.
We pay bills once a week. We pay payroll every 2 weeks, so the 2 days is, I mean, it's not going to impact our operations at all.
Okay.
Any
I
questions?
mean, if anybody has anything?
Mm.
Thank you,
Okay,
Terry.
thanks.
And I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve Resolution R-019-24, authorizing participation in the Tax Pool Prime Investment Pool and designating authorized representatives to act on behalf of the city.
Second.
And all in favor? And it passes.
I would just give credit to Terry and the finance team for taking a little more active role in our cash management and especially our investment management. Last year, we earned over $1.2 million in interest, and we have been trying to be a little more active in that. A couple months ago, we did lock in a 3-year CD at 5%. So I think we all know 5% is probably getting really close to being gone.
Yeah, for sure.
So they have done a great job of trying to maximize our revenue from our reserves. And since we do have those set reserve requirements, we've got a lot of cash that we can try to maximize as much as we can within the risk, that we are allowed to legally, so.
Thank you, Terry, for your hard work. And I'll entertain a motion. Or did we already do
We
that?
already did.
Oh, golly, sorry.
That's okay.
I interrupted your
Yeah, you
cadence.
sure did. Don't get me messed up. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, item 15, consider and take appropriate action on Resolution R-20-24, approving the contract of sale and purchase of real property between Borger, Inc., the Borger Economic Development Corp., and Weatherly Chad O'Neill for approximately 234.23 acres of land located in the west half of Section 17, Block Y, Morris and Cummings Survey, Hutchinson County, Texas. Ms. Fesser, how are you?
Good afternoon. So I just wanted to give the city council, almost said board, sorry, a little bit of frame of reference. So this is that property along Florida that we've talked about a few times, and so it'll allow us to extend Yucca Park Estates to about 60 more homes. So you know that right now we're at 25 homes, and about 18 of those are already under, not, we won't say contract, but they're already kind of reserved. So we think that this is a good purchase so that we can go ahead and extend that, and then hopefully have some commercial property reserved, maybe an apartment building, and then maybe some larger home sites, maybe 10 acres or so later on. The price comes out to about $1,814 and about 50 cents per acre. So that's pretty good. We don't know the usability of all that currently, but we do know for about those 60 homes that that's going to be very usable. So that's what we're asking the council for today. And I'm going to stay up here because the next one's mine as well. So I'm just going to hang out with you for a minute.
Okay.
Anybody have anything? We kind of know about all of this anyway, so. If not, then I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve Resolution R-20-24, authorizing the contract of sale and purchase of real property between Borger, Inc. and the Borger Economic Development Corporation and Weatherly Chad O'Neill for approximately 2.23 acres of land located in the west half section, west half of Section 17, Block Y, Morris and Cummings Survey, Hutchinson County, Texas.
Second.
All in favor? And it passes.
Thank you.
And item 16, consider and take appropriate action on Resolution R-021-24, approving a corridor revitalization agreement between Borger, Inc. and Customs by Steve LLC. Ms. Fesser.
And so this is a really great project. Of course, Customs by Steve is a business that has been in Borger since 2000. And he's really the type of entrepreneur that we want to support. He's been in business a long time and done a successful business. Of course, he's expanded, and even this project will allow him to expand further. He wants to open a muffler shop, and so that will even expand jobs. He's done a lot to improve that, even the aesthetic of that. And so with the purchase of this building and the renovations he's proposing, it's going to, improve that even more and allow him to expand his service line. And so I've got to sit down and talk to Steve several times, and so he's even been, and I won't disclose the businesses, but he's even funded other businesses to start when they couldn't go out and get loans, and he's even carried the note for them. So when we have entrepreneurs like that, not only is this a great project that falls right in line with the program we have, but those are the kind of entrepreneurs we want to support and promote and keep encouraging them to do business in Borger.
And so Main is one, like Cedar, Main, those are all the corridors?
That's the
Okay.
corridor. Mhm. And so I don't know if you've gotten to go down there, but definitely go look at the renovations he has done. I mean, they're perfect. He does an amazing job.
Does anyone have anything? If not, then I'll entertain a motion. Thank you, Amy.
I move to approve Resolution R-021-24, authorizing a corridor revitalization agreement between Borger Inc. and Customs by Steve LLC.
Second.
All in favor? And it passes. And item 17, consider and take appropriate action to award the bid for the City Hall renovation project to the low bidder, Plains Builders, for a total amount of $1,756,636. Mr. Spratling.
So as the council's aware, we've been slowly kind of working through some upgrades to City Hall. 3 years ago, we did a building facility assessment. Before we started down this project, we wanted to make sure that the building was structurally good and worth spending some money into. I think my biggest fear was that we spent a lot of money on this building and then it started crumbling and we had to tear it down and build it. Of course, that study and assessment came back that structurally the building was still sound and could serve the city for many more years, so we started kind of working through some projects. Last year, starting about 18 months ago, we started engineering bid out and we finally replaced the roof on this facility. If you recall back when we awarded that, the roof on this building prior had been put on by Woolsworth. And so even when the city renovated to move into it in 1984, we did not touch the roof. So we have replaced the roof. I don't know if you've noticed, most of the staff, we can definitely tell that we added all that nice new foam insulation up there because I don't have people fighting over the loose fans in the building quite like we did. So that's been pretty good. The next phase, we engaged Park Hill to work through some plans because we needed to identify and have something to bid out. And so we knew that we needed several systems and renovations to this facility, including HVAC and plumbing and bathrooms and ADA accessibility issues. Our plan had always been to do this in multiple phases, paying cash each year for what phase we could do. So when we bid out this project, it was broken into a bunch of a base bid, which we plan to do next year, and then a bunch of alternates to help give us accurate costs as we budgeted the project going forward. The base bid, what we wanted to do next year are all the bathrooms, the ADA accessibility in the front, new front windows and new front glass, and then hallways. So the base bid, we were planning about $600,000. The base bid came in over that amount by about $150,000, a little over $700,000. But then the funny thing is the alternates were cheaper than we thought. We had planned over $600,000 to replace heating and air, but it came in at $410,000. So I started looking and doing some more detailed analysis. And part of the reason that it's a little off is so the base bid's high because they were only guaranteed to get the base bid work, but they could have gotten any alternative. So they're front loading a lot of their overhead. So the overhead is front loaded in that base bid to include all of the other alternates. Also, the low bidder is Plains. They are currently working at the Johnson Park Youth Center swimming pool project. So their bid is, for all of it, is slightly lower than what we anticipated because they're going to already be in town doing that other project. So there are some cost savings. So I did some checking and I called our financial advisor and looked into some short-term debt options. We hadn't talked about this prior to our previous work session because I had never anticipated this being an option, but I hadn't anticipated the total project bids coming in as favorable as they did. So we can get a 5-year note, what's called a tax anticipation note, with a 4% interest rate. If you take the inflationary cost factor, each year, if we do this over multiple years, the cost is going to go up. Each year we do a different phase. In addition, if we break it out like that, the contractors are going to have overhead cost and mobilization costs that get added to each phase. So when we added that all together and what was presented in the work session, it's actually cheaper on the city to issue a short-term note and do the project all at once, taking advantage of the cost savings, even though there will be added interest costs, because the interest cost over 5 years is going to be less than the added cost. So at the end of the 5 years, if we award this all at once, we'll actually be $80,000 cheaper than if we had paid cash for it and broken it out over 5 years. When you look at the debt picture of the city, that's what this is in front of you. You can see that issuing this debt is just a little bitty bump. And actually, by the end of next year, even with this $1.5 million of additional debt, we will have still paid off 3.1% of our debt, which is about $1.4 million. So it will not impact the tax rate. It will be paid out of our operating revenue that we had allocated to do this project over the course of the next 4 years. The difference is we'll do all the work at once. That will allow us to minimize impact to city staff and take advantage of the cost savings. Like I said, as we talk, we're not doing this because it's going to be more expensive. It's actually going to be easier on staff and save a little bit of money. So the total project will include what we talked about in phase 1, which are the bathrooms. It'll replace all the heating and air, replace all the plumbing systems. It will renovate this room to make it ADA accessible and add some technology and flexibility to this space so we can use this council chambers for other community events, public outreach, public engagement. We've been talking with Deidre and even Nicole a lot about doing interactive broadcast, public hearing things. So we need some changes in here so that we can do that and engage with residents both in person and online at the same time. I think this community responds quite well to social media and online engagement, but we do have people that want to interact. So by putting in ceiling microphones and other technology like that, we can still have one event, but engage in both methods. So we did a little bit of that during COVID when we did our Parks Recreation meeting, and me and the consultant sat out there. But I mean, we had cables going everywhere to try to make that work. So we would incorporate some of that into making this room more multi-usable. It would add a ramp from the back so that if we did have a accessibility need for an elected council member, we would have an accessible way for them to access the dais. It would include all the flooring and pretty much take care of all the systems and all the plumbing. So anything else that we would need to do in the future would be definitely more cosmetic and could be phased in, but this would do probably 80% of everything all at once and set us in a good position for the foreseeable future. I will say one thing with the bathrooms, and I had made an assumption one time, a couple of years ago when I was talking with Eddie, and we kind of talked about this, and those that have been in a bathroom at City Hall will understand. Those that won't might not, but Eddie and I were talking about, some things we need to do in renovating the bathrooms. And, Tom was like, well, I don't understand why when they renovated the bathrooms and put in the ADA sink, why they didn't do more. And he's like, what do you mean renovated? I was like, well, when they cut the counters and put in those little hospital sinks. It's like, oh no, that's how it was to begin with. I'm like, they intentionally did that? So I felt kind of bad because I thought that we had done some work, but I guess that was how what the ADA rules in 1984 were, is That's why you've got the one sink built in the kind of the Formica cabinet, and then you've got the other hospital sink, ADA accessible sink right next to it, because you,
Sad, notice that.
but other questions, anything I can answer on that? Should you award the bid, we will issue the debt on September 17th. So then the funds,
And that debt payment will be made out of
out of our operating revenue.
which is what we would have budgeted for the
Right.
yearly thing, so.
And when would
The funds will be delivered the 1st of October, 30 days after the debt is issued.
and was that when they would start the renovation, or is that much later?
Once we award the bid, then we will work on construction contracts and set a pre-construction meeting and kind of work through that. I'm not 100% sure, it wouldn't be too long after that, but there's some phasing and stuff that we've got to work through, because, you know, we want to keep the building operational, so we can't renovate all bathrooms at the same time, and, you know, make sure that, like, we've got time, because part of the ADA, we have to redo the handicap parking spot outside, and we have to do the sidewalk approach. When we're doing that work, it'll close the drive-up window, so we've got to make sure we have time to, you know, warn the public that the drive-through window will be closed for a period of time. We probably don't want to do that at the same time we're doing the foyer, so, you know, because if they can't use the drive-through, they need to come into the front, go to the utility billing counter. So we definitely want the drive-through window to be open if you can't come through the front, because if you can't come through the front, we want you to be able to go to the drive-through window. So just a few little minor things like that.
And what about, since all the work's going to be pretty much internal, except for whatever the new air conditioning units and stuff on the roof, is there going to be a definite cutoff point when everything's supposed to be completed, where they'll be fined if they don't have it completed with such and such?
All of those
time?
contracts have that in there. We are required to have that. I'm not too concerned. Luckily, Plains is the low bidder,
Right, right.
and we've had significant experience with Plains. You know, they did the Dome, they did the youth center before that, they did the transfer station originally and the transfer station renovation. So I'm fairly confident that they'll be able to work through. Luckily, nothing's super major. I mean, there's definitely going to, like, this project includes complete replacement of HVAC ductwork, grills. I mean, there's definitely going to be some inconvenience, but even that they can do in phases. They can do one half of the hallway, they can do this side of the building, because upstairs, there's 3 HVAC systems. You've got the admin plan development side, you've got the finance utility billing side, and then you've got the council room, council conference room side. So you can do that in phases and without much problem. So they'll do one unit at a time. Normally what they want to do is you want to keep one sub here and not like have a sub come and then leave and they come back in a couple of months.
Right.
So luckily on heating and air side, that shouldn't be a problem. The sub can still stay here and work through all the phases without much impact. Like I said, the plumbing will be the one that is a little
We don't
bit.
ever make them pay those fines anyway.
Well, I was just concerned about, you know, I run into my own problems with building stuff. I'll have this done by this time, and then a year and a half later, you hadn't even started on it yet, so.
Yeah, there are, like, we were a little bit behind on the dome, but that was
Yeah, that was a
COVID?
COVID problem.
so that's something outside of their control.
Right.
So what we can generally fine for and the liquidated damages is technically what they call that. And there will be a substantial completion date, and they have to make progress with that, but it has to be something that they
Right, they were the holdup, okay.
were the holdup. If an unforeseen, you know, thing happens, but like I said, we've not had, I mean, even through the Dome, Plains was pretty good to work with. I mean, they really, all things considered, honored the price and got it done.
Okay, I was just curious.
It should also decrease our bills a little bit. I mean, there's some cost savings and more efficient heating and air and some of that stuff, but it's not enough that I did not quantify that and try to factor it into the cost analysis. It'll be some, but not a whole lot.
Anyone have anything else? If not, then I'll entertain a motion.
I move to award the base bid and alternatives 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6 for the City Hall renovation project to the low bidder, Plains Builders, for a total amount of $1,756,636.
Second.
All in favor? and it passes. And so we won't want to have to we won't have to do anything for the debt. That'll just automatically, I mean, since it's,
There will be another action item
okay.
on the September 17th meeting.
Okay,
It's easier than, it's not a CO,
yeah.
and it's not like a bond, it
Yeah.
is more of a debt
You
issued
don't
through a
have the
bank.
financial guy having to tell us all that.
Right.
Okay. And then item 18, consider and take appropriate action to adjourn.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? And we are adjourned. Thank y'all for coming.
Thank y'all.
Be a nice
Could do that.
vacation spot.